Hey guys, how's it going? How's your beautiful day going on this beautiful day? Today, I am grading every NFC team season. I graded all of the AFC teams on Sunday, so go watch that video if you haven't already. Let's get right into this one. Starting off with the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks, who are obviously an A+, because they won the Super Bowl. That's what you go into the NFL season going for. That's what every team wants. You can't get any better than literally winning the Super Bowl. There's not much I have to say about this season for them. Next up is the Los Angeles Rams, who I gave an A. They basically made it to the Super Bowl. In my opinion, the NFC Championship was the Super Bowl of the entire season because either team was going to go on and be able to beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. They had their quarterback win an MVP. Their wide receiver was in the Offensive Player of the Year candidacy. You have some development from your younger defensive players like Byron Young looked really good this year. And again, you were able to almost make it to the top. The reason it's not an A+ is because they didn't make it to the top of the mountain. It was a great season for the Rams, even though they fell just short of being champions, and they get an A. Next up is the San Francisco 49ers, who I gave a B+. Considering the injuries that they had to deal with, the fact that they won a playoff game and were able to get to the divisional round of the playoffs this year and even have a shot at the 1 seed with 1 game left in the season is mind-boggling. This defense was so crippled. You lost Fred Warner, you lost Nick Bosa, you lost so many key parts to this defense, and it was just a shell of itself at the end of the season. So the fact that they were able to actually make it to the playoffs and even be in contention for that 1 seed is ridiculous. You had Brock Purdy miss time. You had your wide receivers miss time. Brandon Ayuk didn't even play the entire season. George Kittle missed a few games. Trent Williams missed a few games. There were so many injuries on this team, and Kyle Shanahan kept this team afloat. In my opinion, he was the best coach of the year. They weren't supposed to get as far as they were, but because they are so well coached, they got there. And now with another season of injuries down the drain and a lot of their players getting older and older, it looks like the championship window is getting closer and closer to closed. I would understand people wanting to grade this season a little less than it actually was, but because of all of these injuries and the fact that they still made it to where they did, gives them a B+. And the last team from the NFC West is the Arizona Cardinals, who I gave an F. It's obvious why I gave this team an F. I think most people assumed that the Cardinals would be the last team in this division going into this season, but I don't think anybody expected them to be this bad. They still kind of looked like a borderline, maybe they can squeak into the playoffs team, but they were one of the worst teams in football. Kyler Murray got hurt again, and the whole regime had to be reset once again. This whole team really needs a reset because you don't really know what you have with Kyler. You don't know if he's going to be able to work with Mike LaFleur this season. We don't know how good of a quarterback he really is, if he's possibly reached the ceiling of who he is as a player. You know, I think the general infrastructure with this team needs to have a full restart so that they can actually be competitive again. The Cardinals have just been such a poverty franchise for the longest time, and it's time for that to change. They need to fully restart, and it's going to be hard to get players to come over there, but if you can, the Cardinals just need new players. They need a new regime. Maybe Mike LaFleur is the guy, but there's just so many things that need to be fixed with this organization. You can't do it all in one season. Next up, we have the Chicago Bears, who I gave an A+. This team now has a culture. They have a franchise QB who looks like he has potential to be a top 5 QB in the NFL. You have an amazing coach who looks like one of the best offensive minds in all of football. Those are really the only 3 things that you need to create a good perennial playoff team, and the Bears have that. And for the first time ever, they have a true franchise quarterback at the helm of this team. They went from 5-12 last year to 11-6 this year. They beat their division rival in a playoff game, and not just any division rival, it's one of the biggest division rivals in all of the NFL. It was the Bears' first playoff win since 2010, so it's been 15 seasons since they've been able to win a playoff game, and it was their first playoff appearance in 5 seasons. This was just a very, very monumental season for the Bears, very important for their future ahead, and it was a fantastic season for the Bears. Maybe they didn't make it to the Super Bowl or the NFC Championship game, but that's not where the Bears expected to be. That's not the standard I'm going to hold them to at this current moment. Right now, they had an A+ season. Next up is the Green Bay Packers, who I gave a B. It's really hard to try and fully grade this season because of the injuries. This team looked like a Super Bowl contender at one point this season. They looked like one of the best teams in the league. Their defense was fantastic. Jordan Love was playing at another level, and this offense looked like it was clicking on another level. The Packers looked like a real team to beat when it came to the NFC playoffs, and it ended up that because of all these injuries, you had Tucker Kraft tear his ACL, Micah Parsons tear his ACL, Christian Watson missed games, Jordan Love even missed games. They had so many players on the offensive side of the ball miss games that they weren't able to be as good as we thought they were able to be. Because of the evolution of Jordan Love's game this season, because of the fact that you did get Micah Parsons, and when you had Micah Parsons, you looked like a Super Bowl contender, that gives it a B. The reason it's not higher is because they didn't win a playoff game, and obviously only finished the season 9-7-1, barely squeaking in. But the roster looks really good for the future, and the Packers look really good for the future. For the Minnesota Vikings, I gave them a D. I don't think you found your quarterback. JJ McCarthy just doesn't look like he's going to be the quarterback of the future. I've said this before in a lot of videos that I've made throughout this entire season. If you can't get the ball to Justin Jefferson, who is arguably your best offensive player, who is arguably your actually just straight up your best player on your entire team, and you can't get him the football, that is a major problem. They had the worst quarterback room in the NFL. Nobody could get the ball to Justin Jefferson, and that is a major problem. The reason it's not a complete F is because I think this roster is truly good enough to be a perennial playoff team. This roster is good enough. You are a quarterback away right now. You have the offensive infrastructure. Maybe you look for a running back. You have the defensive infrastructure. You have Kevin O'Connell at the helm. All you need is a quarterback to put this team into another stratosphere and into a tier of a team that could win this division again, like it almost did last season. With Sam Darnold just a year ago, this team was 14-3. They truly just need a quarterback. And our last team of the NFC North is the Detroit Lions, who I gave an F. Last year you were 15-2 and you finished this season 18-9 or 18-9. Last year you finished 15-2. This year you finished 8-9 and missed the playoffs entirely. Ben Johnson leaving this team could really kill all the momentum that this team once had, because I really believe that Ben Johnson was a major driving factor for why this Lions team was so good. Last year, the Lions offense would score 30, 40, 50 points in a game. They were super efficient. There was a reason they were 15-2. It's because this offense was so high powered. It was not because of the defense. We talked about it all season, but even at the end of the year, for most of the year, they didn't have Aiden Hutchinson. This defense was not a crazy good unit. They were so good because their offense was so good. And now that Ben Johnson left the building, their offense comes down a peg. Their defense stays relatively similar, but gets a little bit better because they get Aiden Hutchinson back, but now they are a significantly worse team. Although I do think Ben Johnson leaving this team is probably their biggest difference from this year to last year, I also think that Jared Goff is just not the quarterback that you want him to be. This Lions team is able to be a decent regular season team to a really good regular season team with Jared Goff at the helm. I think he has good qualities, but when it comes down to really important games, when it comes down to playoff games, when it comes down to games against good teams, when you need to win the game and that team may be able to stop the run a little bit or slow down the run a little bit, you're going to need your quarterback to make plays. If you want to win a Super Bowl, you're going to need your quarterback to have to make plays in those situations. And Jared Goff is just not the guy to do that. With this roster, Jared Goff can't be your serious answer to the quarterback position. It just can't be, because you're not going to win a Super Bowl that way. I understand the last couple years, a borderline top 10 quarterback to a not top 10 quarterback has won the Super Bowl. But Jared Goff is not even in the top 15 right now. You can't put your trust in Jared Goff. Yes, a quarterback who's not at the top of the top can win the Super Bowl if they're just outside the top 10 with a fantastic roster. But a quarterback outside of the top 15 cannot win a Super Bowl no matter how good the roster is. It doesn't matter if you have the 2024 Eagles team that destroyed in the Super Bowl. It doesn't matter if you don't have a decent, at least, quarterback at the helm. Jared Goff is just straight up not good enough, and they are in no man's land until he is not the quarterback of this team anymore. And unfortunately, we don't know what the roster is going to look like when they finally give up on Jared Goff, and that's a huge, huge problem right now that the Lions have. Now, to start off with the NFC East is the Philadelphia Eagles, who I gave a D. They won the Super Bowl last year, and the roster didn't get all that crazy different. It got a little bit different. The offensive line was not as good as it was last year, but you have relatively the same roster. You went 11-6 and lost in the first round to a team who was a hospital squad. You lost to the 49ers. They didn't have a lot of their best players in this game, and they got destroyed in the next week against the Seahawks. Kevin Patullo was really bad. He was a terrible play caller. It was a horrible hire by Nick Sirianni, and to be honest, that hire in it of itself puts him on the hot seat. They weren't able to generate a run game. Their offensive line was a little bit worse, but I also think that their scheme was putrid, and Saquon Barkley wasn't able to find holes or get as many yards in the run game as they were able to last year. This passing attack was similar last year. It wasn't a great unit last year either, but the reason that the Eagles were so fantastic was because they had a 2,000-yard rusher in Saquon Barkley. They were the most efficient run offense in the entire NFL, which made up for their woes in their pass game, because their defense was also a top 3 unit in the NFL last year. They come into this year, their defense is once again a top 3 unit, but they don't have the run game, and that really hindered them for the entire season. It's why they lost in the first round. It's why they weren't good enough to win in more games than they did this season. So the Eagles just significantly underperformed from what people thought that they could be. I mean, they looked like a team that could have a chance to go back to back because the roster looked relatively similar, and that just was not the case. Next up is the Dallas Cowboys, who I also gave a D. The conversation about the Cowboys is going to be very similar to what I said about the Bengals in the video about the AFC, in which this team, this offense is definitely good enough to be a playoff team. It's definitely good enough to possibly be a Super Bowl level offense. Dak Prescott is a good quarterback, and he makes good plays, and especially when he has George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb at the helm, they're going to be very successful as an offense, and they were very successful as an offense this year. You also had Javonte Williams, who had his best season of his entire career, and you just re-signed him. So that was really good for the Cowboys to find a running back like Javonte Williams, because the biggest thing that they've been missing in the past few years has been the run game, and that was able to be fixed this year, and they had a much better offense because of it. But it didn't even matter, because they had one of the worst defenses in the NFL, if not the worst. It got a little bit better once they got Quinnen Williams. When it was Quinnen Williams and Kenny Clark on the defensive line, they were a little bit better. They could stop the run a little bit, but besides those two players, the whole unit is just horrible. There's no good redeeming quality about any players on this defense. They were one of the worst units in the league. When you trade away a franchise cornerstone like Micah Parsons, the season isn't going to look good, especially when your defense was as bad as it was. And a lot of the reason it was as bad as it was is because you needed what Micah Parsons gave you on a night-to-night basis, on a game-to-game basis. You traded him away for Kenny Clark and just a pick that I don't think matters as much. I don't I think because of that trade, it significantly knocks this season. And then the fact that they didn't make the playoffs and weren't that good knocks it even more. The Cowboys got a D. Next up was the Commanders, who I gave an F. They were in the NFC Championship game last year. And then this season, they weren't even close to making the playoffs. I'm pretty sure they were 5-12. They were absolutely putrid. And a lot of it has to do with injuries. Obviously, Jaden Daniels missed a major part of this season. But even when Jaden Daniels was in the game, the infrastructure of this team was terrible. The defense was horrible. The offensive infrastructure around Jaden Daniels just wasn't amazing. The offensive line was better than it has been, but the running back room is horrible. The wide receiver room is just not very good at all. Terry McLaurin is their best weapon. He was injured a lot this year, and he's an older guy. You're not going to have him for much longer, and how much are you going to really trust that Terry McLaurin is the true answer at your wide receiver position going forward? You don't have any more tight ends. Zach Ertz's career might be over after he got his knee bent backwards. The team is old. The team is slow. The infrastructure sucks. It just felt like a major drop off from last year, and this team just wasn't good whatsoever, and they need major upgrades going into next season. And the team who finished last in this division was the New York Giants, who I gave a D. Obviously, they were not good at all, which is why this is a D. They were a terrible football team. They had their coach fired mid-season, so clearly they weren't the best team in the world. But they uncovered loads of young talent that this team has, and their future looks brighter than a lot of teams in the NFL. You have a quarterback who is showing a lot of promise and looks like he could possibly be a franchise quarterback. You have a running back who looks like he can be a fantastic running back. I know a lot of people say that his career isn't going to be very long, but running backs' careers aren't long in the first place. I don't know, he's going to go from, instead of playing 8 good years of running back football, which is still an insane amount, he's going to play what? 5 or 6? I don't care. Cam Scatabo is an insanely talented running back, and he is a very big piece for the Giants going forward. And yeah, maybe his career won't last the longest, but this is only going to be the second year in his career. So let's give him a little leeway. And then obviously you have Malik Neighbors, Theo Johnson, Andrew Thomas. The defensive line is filled with talent, with Dexter Lawrence and Abdul Carter and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. You have just so many weapons defensively on this team as well. There's just a few fine-tuning things that the Giants need to get together, and this team can really look good next season. In our last division of the video, the NFC South, I am starting with the Carolina Panthers, who I gave a B+. The bright side of this team is that they won the South for the first time in a while for them. I'm pretty sure. I think it was like 6 or 7 years since they had won this division. And then you put up a great fight in the wild card round when nobody really believed that you would. Just a fantastic end of the season for the Panthers, because a lot of people thought they were going to get blown out in that wild card round. They put up a really good fight and almost even won the game to go to the next round against a real Super Bowl contender in the Los Angeles Rams. And you have a ton of young talent. This roster looks really good and up and coming. Your defense doesn't look horrible, although it does need some fine-tuning. It does need some changes. And the offensive talent looks fantastic. Your offensive line has been one of the best units in the league. Your wide receivers are so young and good. You have Jalen Coker, you have Tet McMillan, Xavier Legette, I guess, and your running backs aren't horrible. The problem with the Panthers that I have is I don't know if they should really put their faith in Bryce Young as their quarterback of the future. I don't know what his real ceiling is. It feels like he's hit it. I feel like Bryce Young is as good as he's ever going to be, because he doesn't have the athleticism or the arm strength or the smarts to be able to get better than he already is. He's not skilled enough like there are some quarterbacks out there that you can trust that he's going to get better. He just doesn't have the same skill that everybody else does have. And he just has way too many limitations to his actual game as a quarterback for me to think that he's a true franchise quarterback moving forward. I think he's a fantastic leader. There's a reason they made it to the playoffs. There's a reason they almost won that game. I think he can make great plays in great situations, but I do not believe that Bryce Young is going to be the guy to actually take this team to bigger heights. This roster is good enough to actually be a real playoff team and a real contender. Like, this is a really, really beautiful roster right now, in my opinion, especially with Dave Canales at the helm, who I think is a fantastic head coach. But I don't think Bryce Young is going to be able to take his play to another level, which is not going to be able to bring this team to another level. This team was still an 8-9 football team. I understand they made it to the playoffs and almost won a game, but let me reiterate, they were still 8-9 this season. It's not like they were 10-7 or 11-6 and made the playoffs. They were 8-9. And I think a lot of that has to do with the limitations that Bryce Young brings to this team. Still a B+ for them, but they have major questions going forward. For the Buccaneers, I have a D. They had a major fall off this season. They looked like a possible Super Bowl contender to begin this season. They even beat the Seahawks in week 5, and it didn't even matter. They majorly fell off. I'm pretty sure they lost like 6 or 7 games in a row at the end of this season. That forced them to miss the playoffs. This team has some real young talent, but my problem with the Buccaneers is I think they're hypnotized by the electricity of Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield is one of the most electric players in the entire NFL. But I think that blinds the Buccaneers and that blinds most NFL fans from seeing who Baker Mayfield really is. He is not a quarterback who is going to lead you to a Super Bowl. He is not a quarterback who is going to be able to be your franchise cornerstone guy. I love Baker Mayfield. Again, let me reiterate, the most electric player in the NFL, and he can make some electric plays. But people are hypnotized by that, so much so that they forget who Baker Mayfield really is. He is not a franchise cornerstone. Baker Mayfield is more of a Ryan Fitzpatrick than anything else. And until the Buccaneers organization can really see that, they're going to be stuck in this hole. They couldn't even win the worst division in football with the roster that they have. And you don't want to blame that on Baker Mayfield, at least a little. I understand Todd Bowles is not the best head coach in the world, but Baker Mayfield is a major problem for this team. He's a major reason why they are not a perennial playoff team and a Super Bowl contender. Next up is the Atlanta Falcons, who I gave a D as well. Drake London and Bijan Robinson are major stars. That was the biggest takeaway from this season for them, in my opinion. Bijan, obviously, in the Offensive Player of the Year race, and in my opinion, he was really, really close to winning it. He was my pick before the season. Unfortunately, I was just off because JSN is an absolutely amazing football player. You also had Kyle Pitts have the best season of his career, and it was looking bleak for Kyle Pitts there for a while. Now they've franchise tagged him, so they'll have him next season. But the team just wasn't good. I mean, they were 8-9 again, and for a lot of this season, they looked like they were going to be worse than 8-9. In fact, when Kirk Cousins came into the game is when they started winning more games. I don't know how much I believe in Michael Penix. I think he has way too many accuracy problems, and obviously those can be fixed. And they're the same problems with some of the other quarterbacks in his draft class, but he's already this old. He was the oldest player in his draft class, and he just tore his ACL. I just don't know how much I really believe in Michael Penix being the guy going forward. Maybe he can be. Maybe Kevin Stefanski can bring it out of Michael Penix, and I'm not going to totally lose faith in his entire career to this point, but I just don't believe that he is the answer for the Falcons. I think this team is another team who is just a quarterback away from being a really good team. They have the offensive infrastructure. They have an Offensive Player of the Year who maybe one day can be an MVP candidate. They have a fantastic wide receiver. Right now they have Kyle Pitts. We'll see how that goes in the future if he re-signs with the Falcons or moves on from this team. And this defense was really good at moments. They have young pieces on this team, and they look like a young, hungry defense. James Pierce was fantastic this season. A big reason why this season is a D for the Falcons is because of the draft day trade that they made, though. Trading away your first round pick from this season was just a horrible idea. I don't think it was worth it, and this team really needs that pick right now. Absolutely. They need that pick from the Rams, and they aren't going to be able to use it. I just don't think it was worth it in the grand scheme of their team right now. And last but not least is the New Orleans Saints, who got a D. But this was an F, maybe even an F minus at one point in this season, and they were able to turn it around and make it look good. At the end of the season, they went on a win streak, and they looked like the best team in this division, if we're being honest. And they have good potential. You think you have potential with Tyler Shuck. He looks like a guy who has franchise quarterback tendencies. You don't know quite yet, but he's looked fantastic so far. And you have young pieces around this team. Cap space is still kind of messed up, but they have room to grow next season. And because of how they looked at the end of this season, they look like the best team in this division and possibly the team that can go worst to first next year. And just because of the way that they finished this season, that's why it's a D and not an F. That'll bring me to the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, I graded the AFC teams. I've also made some ranking videos on this season, and I've made a bunch of other videos pertaining to what has happened in this NFL season. So go watch those if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in the next video.